Good evening, everyone. All right. Phone and you wish you purchased the ad-free version of something. So my name is Jean-Pierre Oriol. I'm the Commissioner for the Department of Planning and Natural Resources, and pleased to have you all with us here today for the second round of town hall meetings for the Virgin Islands Comprehensive Land and Water Use Plan. Very excited as we are continuing to move forward with this auspicious endeavor. We've been working very closely with our contractors, the Horsley Witten Group, in compiling a lot of the information that you have sent to us over the last several months. Just want to say thank you as we begin for all of the input that you have shared towards the process thus far. This evening, what we're going to do is I'm going to give a very brief opening. I'm going to turn it over to the Horsley Witten Group to lead you through a presentation. And then we have different stations with our formative issues. Sorry, too many things in my head. Formative issues that we've compiled, some of the things that have come up during the rounds of surveys and the input that we gathered from our first round of town hall meetings. So again, it's meant to be interactive. We want everyone to participate. We're welcoming your opinions and your voices. We just ask that everyone please be respectful of one another as we proceed. So please, please, please share your thoughts and ideas. Make this your comprehensive plan. By the way, one of the things that came up is, it was getting too long to say Virgin Islands Comprehensive Land and Water Use Plan. So we're trying something different based on opinions. We're thinking about VI Comp Plan. So I want you guys to let us know if VI Comp Plan works as a shortened name or acronym, or if there's something else that we can come up with, then let's try and identify that as well. So again, thank you all for your presence here this evening, your participation into planning the future of the Virgin Islands. And now I'll turn it over to Nate from the Horsley Witten Group to lead us through the presentation. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for everyone for coming out this evening on this warm day. It is my honor to be before you today as someone who does not live here and is definitely an outsider. I'm humbled to be speaking here today. I want to start by saying we're not here to tell you what to do. We're here to listen to you and to create a plan that resonates with you and that makes sense for your future. And that's what we've been trying to do in all the materials that you've seen tonight. So I wanted to spend a few minutes, particularly for those of you who may not have attended our first round of town hall meetings back in February and March, to do a bit of a refresher on what we've done so far and how we got to where we are today. So I will skip this, as the Commissioner mentioned. If you hear the term comp plan, that's what we're referring to. That Comprehensive Land and Water Use Plan, CLWUP, was just a mouthful. So if you hear comp plan, that's what we're talking about. So we have been, and by we, I mean you as a community, have been at this for a long time. The legislation that was passed to recommend the passage of this plan is over 50 years old now. And I know there have been a lot of attempts, and I see a lot of people in this room who have been part of those efforts. I would love for anyone who has been part of an effort to develop and adopt the comp plan so far to please raise your hand and look around. I want to thank you all. Please give yourselves a round of applause for not giving up after decades, literally. This really speaks volumes about how much you care about your community. And I'm, again, very humbled that you're all here and all continuing to push for this plan. So what got us here? I'll give a brief description of what the comp plan is for those of you who are not familiar. So the comp plan is a shared vision for the Virgin Islands' future and a roadmap that guides how we get there together. So really it will help the community make decisions about where new development occurs and what it looks like, or where development does not occur in the areas that you should be conserving. How we balance competing uses for water, such as boating, fishing, swimming, and so forth. How to protect our environmentally sensitive areas, our waters, coastlines, and historic sites. Prioritizing future investments in community services and infrastructure that promote fairness and equity so that everyone in the community is benefiting from these investments. Making sure the land and water use decision-making process is fair, equitable, and consistent. And this is something we've heard a lot from all of you on all 3 islands. So the comp plan covers a lot of topics, but it is primarily in regard to how they impact land and water use and the management of land and water. So as a brief example, we will be dealing with issues of healthcare and schools in this plan. However, we'll be dealing with those things in terms of where those resources are located and how people can physically get to them. So we'll not be looking at, for example, healthcare policy or educational policy, but how they fit into the built environment. Also, we want to be clear from the get-go that the comp plan itself is not a change in the territory's land use and zoning laws. So it is a framework for future legislation, a framework for making future decisions. So formative issues, the commissioner mentioned that we have 10 stations around the back of the auditorium. And the legislation that requires this plan for the territory does have certain things that the plan has to do. But we really wanted to start by building this plan around the things that are most important to you in the community. So again, not coming here to tell you what to do, but to listening and taking what we've heard and turning that into sort of the pillars of this plan. So we got that from listening to folks at the last round of town hall meetings. We've had some online surveys, and also want to acknowledge that we are using the work that has been done over the last several decades, looking at the past efforts at this plan, looking at the many other existing plans in the territory, and building off of those. So we know we are not starting from scratch. We also have some wonderful, dedicated working group members who were self-identified volunteers to help us with this process and to guide our work. So I would like to take a moment to acknowledge working group members who are here today. If you could raise your hand if you're on the St. Thomas working group. There we go. Excellent. Look around. Thank you all so much for your volunteerism. We had created these formative issues based on all that information. We did have an online survey that came out last month just to vet these ideas. I will say, and we're going to be honest about this throughout this process, we had a very low response rate to that survey. We had wonderful response rates to the in-person events, but the online public survey was limited. However, the feedback was very positive. I would say the #1 issue that we heard from that survey was that we need to make water uses more prominent, to make them as prominent as land use issues. And so what we are asking of all of you tonight is to view what we've created so far. Did we hear you correctly? Are we on the right track? Does this reflect what you see for the future of the U.S. Virgin Islands? And so what we've heard from the working groups, again, they've been tremendously helpful for us. And when they first reviewed these documents, the first thing was, you know what, we need to do more on-the-ground engagement. So that's things like this, meeting with people in person. We were pounding the pavement today at several local spots, handing out cards, talking to people on the street. Also, they want us to focus on people, culture, and heritage. So all of these things, putting people first, and how all of these policies impact people. Also, one of the major themes that we've heard from everyone is an emphasis on government transparency and accountability, as well as capacity of government agencies to do the work they're charged to do. And I will say that all the formative issues in their long form are on the project website, www.planusvi.com. So additional things we heard from the working group, there should be more opportunities for local decision making, that too much of the decision making is from the top down. We heard this particularly in St. John, but really across all three islands. We heard a number of specific environmental concerns with an emphasis on the need for regeneration, sustainability, and not just for conservation, things, natural resources that we want to conserve, but how we can make development more sustainable. And also, again, more of an emphasis on water uses versus land uses. So based on all of this, we started thinking through what are some of the overarching issues that are common throughout everything we've been hearing from the public. And it really occurred to us that this was about how you make change as a community together, and what principles you should have as a community for how decisions are made. So, this plan is going to have a lot of actions, but it can't predict every action and the result of every action. It's not going to solve all of our problems. So it's really important that this plan develop a framework for making decisions, how we make decisions together as a community in a responsible way. So based on that, we have some suggestions based on what we've heard from all of you. So we hope this resonates with you and makes sense. And the concept would be that everything else that we're talking about, these principles will apply. So for one, set goals. Know what it is you're trying to accomplish before you start a new program or policy, and clearly define the desired outcomes and what you would like to achieve if you're successful. Next, collect data. If you don't have data to justify territory spending, investments, policies, you can't know if you're hitting your goals and doing what you said you wanted to do. I also need to be accountable. So use that data to track outcomes, to know if you are going the way you want to go, if you're achieving what you said you want to achieve, and if you're not, that's okay. It's okay to fail and try again, so long as you're holding yourself accountable. Next, act equitably. So any decision that we're making as a community, ask ourselves, who's benefiting, who's not benefiting? Are these investments helping everyone in the community? We also want to mind the future. We know that climate change is happening. We see the drought, the heat waves, so many issues with storms, and that's just going to keep happening. And we need to be mindful of that and make sure the decisions that we're making today are taking those things into consideration. And lastly, it has to be okay to embrace change. We heard from a lot of people that there's a tendency to do the same thing over and over again and expect different results. And it really needs to be okay to try new things, so long as we hold ourselves accountable and keep trying. So I want to give a brief example of this, real-world example. Our working group said that would be helpful. So, as you may have known, if you've been paying attention to the news, the governor recently proposed a bill to rehabilitate derelict and abandoned properties without a change in ownership. Will this be good for the territory? How will we know? You've got to try before you can say. So, if you were to apply these principles to that proposed legislation, first, setting our goals. What are we trying to accomplish? We want to fix buildings in the community, and we want to make sure we're not displacing people and that people can maintain ownership of their property. So set targets, and this is completely hypothetical. Say you want to reduce derelict and abandoned buildings by 50% in 10 years, and that you want at least 90% of the properties that are involved to maintain their current ownership. Great. How are you going to know that? You have to collect the data, keep a baseline inventory of derelict buildings, track your investments over time, track property owner data, and hold yourself accountable. Is it working? Are you renovating the number of buildings that you wanted to renovate? Are people actually be able to remain in their homes? Are you keeping people in their ancestral properties? And if not, where can we make adjustments? And acknowledging, learning, changing, and having it be okay to, again, fail, so long as you acknowledge that and make adjustments. Act equitably. Again, who's benefiting, who's not benefiting? To know that, we've got to track that data on the property owners. Are there different outcomes based on your income? Are there different outcomes based on your race? If there are, then you have to go back to the drawing board and fix that. Mind the future. What are those benefits to future generations? Are we building back better? Are we weatherproofing? Are we more energy efficient? Are these homes going to be able to be available for your children and grandchildren into the future? But again, embracing change. We won't know until we try and test and refine. And if we do this, if everything we do embraces these principles, there's nothing you can't do. I know that sounds a little Pollyannish, but it's true. And it really also gives you a forum to have these conversations as a community and decide how you want to move forward together. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Nate Kelly, and he's just going to give you some examples of what you see behind you today before we go to the open house.
Thank you, Jeff. Good evening, everyone. So as Jeff mentioned, we're just going to go through quickly some of our guiding principles here. And just as a reminder, the commissioner talked about all the big ball of feedback that we've gotten, excuse me, over the last several months. And our job has been to comb through that bit by bit, page by page, and try to find the patterns and try to find the issues that we hear coming out of these different feedback mechanisms, whether it's public meetings or surveys. And we distilled that into the formative issues. And again, if you go on the website, you'll see sort of a paragraph, a long narrative paragraph that sort of summarizes each of these issues. But as we go forward into this plan development, we really need to cut that down. We really need to make this succinct. We really need to crystallize what we're trying to say about these policies. And that's where this material is continuing to evolve, and that's what you'll look at tonight. So these guiding principles are 1 to 2 sentences each, encapsulating that formative issues. And beneath that are the policy directions. So the guiding principle sounds like a goal. As Jeff talked about, setting goals, it sounds like a big, broad goal related to housing or to natural resources or to heritage. And then the policy directions underneath that start to speak to how we're going to get there. What are we going to move forward on? What are we going to invest in to make that happen? And then we'll get to working strategies in our next steps as we go forward into drafting the plan, but we've given you some taste of what that might look like so you can see the flow of ideas from the general down to the actionable, down to the specific. So our first guiding principle deals with governance, governing effectively. And the language for this particular guiding principle says decisions related to land and water use should be based on sound planning and enforced by agencies that have the adequate resources to do that. That's really the overarching guiding principle we need for governance of land and water use. And some examples there is staffing and training. We've heard again and again from the moment we started working on this project months ago now, that capacity is a significant issue and training is a significant issue. So you cannot have adequate enforcement and adequate governance if your government agencies don't have the capacity to do that. On the other side of that coin, there needs to be accountability for those agencies. So adopting standards, holding decision makers accountable to this plan as we move forward, making sure the plan doesn't disappear when a new administration comes in, so building mechanisms in to make that happen. Relative to history and culture, the guiding principle here, again, loud and clear from our engagement, is that restoring, healing, preserving and cultivating awareness of cultural resources in land and water use policy is critical to the economic success of the U.S. Virgin Islands and the cultural experience of future generations. To ensure that that happens, we need to think mindfully about how we develop going forward. We need to make sure that proposals for development, whether it's of an existing building that has cultural significance or a site that has cultural significance, that those assets are accounted for and protected within that development process. And then reinvesting in our history, perhaps with some of the derelict property legislation that may be coming down the pike. Those types of tools that give property owners access to capital up front so that they can make proactive investments that they can afford to make to ensure that their property lasts, to ensure that it is appropriately restored going forward for them and for future generations. Housing, providing homes for everyone. Housing is not affordable to most people in the U.S. Virgin Islands. This is what we've heard again from the moment we started this process. This is a significant issue across all three of the major islands. So we understand now that a diverse and an abundant supply of safe and healthy homes is fundamental to the economic, social, and environmental prosperity of the U.S. Virgin Islands. People need safe, clean homes. They need access to these homes, and there is a major pent-up demand that needs to be met. Some of the examples of policies is more flexible zoning. The zoning that you have in place right now in some cases hasn't been changed in 40 years. It's not meeting the demands of a 21st century market and the preferences and the needs that young folks, starter homes, young families, seniors, whoever they may be, have for different types of housing supply. Probate reform is a huge issue here. Homes that are stuck in probate, trying to iron out issues around ownership and transferability and estate issues. Homes that sit in probate are homes that are not taken care of, that are taken off the housing rolls, and that needs to be something that is addressed with great clarity. Connecting people to people, commerce, and places. Connectivity, this idea of getting people from point A to point B, sounds sort of something that isn't necessarily that complex until you start to peel back the layers. It's not very easy to get around in a lot of these communities on St. Thomas and on the other major islands. The public transportation system is not as strong as it should be. The roads can be unsafe for people to walk or drive or bike. They can just be unsafe as a whole. So making sure that when we think about land use and water use, thinking about how people are going to get from their home to the grocery store, from their home to healthcare, from their home to services, and from them home to the park or to the waterfront. Making sure those connections are stronger and safer is going to be really key to the success of this plan. So with walkability, investing in sidewalks and paths and roadways that should be designed in a way that is more environmentally friendly. Roadways become floodways very quickly if they're not designed properly. That can cause property damage, all sorts of issues for folks. So design choices and standards need to be clear for those issues. Protecting natural resources. Land and water use policies here must reflect that the U.S. Virgin Islands' natural resources are central to your local cultural identity, your public health, the health of your ecosystems, and your economic well-being. This is a very special place, and much of that is rooted in your natural resources. So to protect that, which is an investment in your future, development review needs to be clear. You need to set clear expectations for environmental impacts. Land and water management practices can even regenerate, can repair environmental damage that you've enhanced if the standards are written correctly. groundwater protection. You all are experiencing a very serious drought right now, and protecting your groundwater resources is going to be paramount moving forward. There's a direct connection between what you do on the land and the health of your groundwater beneath it. So making sure that those standards are in place to protect that precious resource is really important. Improving and maintaining quality of life, and what we're delving into here really is your access to services. So land and water use policies should support a sustainable system of public amenities, parks, waterfronts, and services that foster civic responsibility, public health equity, opportunities for physical activity, and community pride. If you're proud of the neighborhood that you live in, if you're proud of the places that you visit, you're going to want to take care of them. Examples: access to health facilities, something that's come up again and again on all three of the major islands. Identifying locations for expansion of healthcare related facilities on each island. Public shoreline and water access, ensuring public recreational, shoreline, and water access for all Virgin Islanders continues. Mitigating the impacts of climate change. The U.S. Virgin Islands should adopt land and water use policies that anticipate the impacts of our changing climate and strengthen our ability to meet those challenges. So what does that mean from a policy perspective? Well, as an example, development can become more resilient. New construction, renovations, infrastructure should be built to withstand storms, sea level rise, inundation, and other climate impacts, as well as heat impacts. Protecting trees, something as simple and basic as that. U.S. Virgin Islanders have a very special relationship to your trees. We hear this again and again. We've seen amazing reports on heritage trees, the legacy of different fruit trees, and all the memories that people have of the trees that they got to visit in their childhood. And protecting trees, expanding forestry programs to increase native tree plantings and maintenance. This provides shade, and this can provide food, access to fruit trees. Building economic opportunity and resilience. Land and water use policies will look to diversify the U.S. Virgin Island economy. A diverse economy is a much more resilient economy, and build on your strengths and opportunities specific to the different islands of the territory. The major islands are different. They all have different strengths. They all have different opportunities, different identities, different heritage and cultural resources that all figures into the economic equation. Examples of what we want to bring forward here are making sure there are opportunities for everyone. So again, that idea of expanding opportunity and access to capital for residents and landowners. There's been a lot of capital, a lot of money flowing around the U.S. Virgin Islands, but we're hearing that people can't access it. There are barriers to getting that in their pockets so that they can make the investments in their properties and their businesses that allow them to thrive. Growing a food economy. There's tremendous interest and momentum right now in the agricultural community for the U.S. Virgin Islands. And this idea of adopting land use regulations that foster and complete a sustainable system of food production, planting, harvesting, processing, distribution, food, service, and waste. A circular economy, a more resilient, sustainable, equitable food economy with culturally relevant choices for folks on the U.S. Virgin Islands. This is the vision that's emerging and can be supported by this plan. Sustainability and stewardship. This is about your infrastructure. Building infrastructure and providing everyday services to residents in an equitable and sustainable manner that serves the needs of current and future residents and visitors, promoting biodiversity, restoring ecosystems and the environment, and improving public health. How do we do this? Some of the ideas that have been brought to the table, some of the policies that have been discussed a more resilient power infrastructure, continuing to build a more reliable power grid using microgrids, battery storage, burying utilities, and using composite rather than wooden utility poles, slowly but surely chipping away, making that system more stronger and more redundant. Water supply. When we talk about the agricultural question and the cost of building housing, water supply is a key element in all those equations. So adopting development standards and designing infrastructure that can treat, store, and conserve your water supplies. Lastly, this one sort of sums it all up. This is your development, redevelopment, restoration, and conservation. One of the things that the comp plan is going to do is it's going to lay out a map that says this is where we should do this is where we should do that, this is where we should not do that. You have to see it visually in front of you. And it'll be the basis for zoning reform going forward. It'll be both your land and your marine areas. So in future land and water management, you're going to identify areas suitable for different types of development, areas that need the most care, the most conservation, and areas that should be targeted for restoration, both with land and water. And then we'll think about walkable mixed-use communities. We'll pull together all these different ideas of housing and transportation and creating or strengthening the mixed-use communities that you already have. And again, reformatting, revising, amending the existing rules that you have that really don't allow this stuff to happen the way you need it to because they haven't been touched in decades. So that's an overview of sort of our guiding principles and some samples. I know that took a little while, but these plans cover a lot. What I want to do now is just turn it over to our final presenter who's just going to do one little slide and talk to you about how we're going to get feedback from you for the rest of the night and the rest of the process. So Krista?
Good evening. Thank you. Okay. For those of you who have come a little earlier this evening, you saw in the back of the room we have 10 boards, one for each formative issue, and this is just one of them. So each one goes over what Nate just highlighted. And I will touch on that in a minute. But there will be someone from Horsley Witten and our friends from Camoines who are helping with us, and also some folks from DPNR who are there to answer questions that you might have on anything that's on the board. But it's really to have sort of an informal conversation about these issues and give you a chance to sort of ask some specifics and give us some feedback. So on each board, Nate, if you don't mind coming a little closer, thank you. So each one has our formative issue up top, and in the colored box is the guiding principle that Nate read. And what we've done is we've numbered all of these policies, and the number does not mean any ranking or anything like that, but it helps us understand where your feedback's coming from. So we have these worksheets here, and you can circle your formative issue, and then just write the number policy that you want to give us feedback on. So you can tell us if you strongly agree, disagree, unsure, you need more information, or there's some space here and you can just write any feedback that you would like to give. How can we improve any of what's listed, what's missing, really just getting any ideas that you might have on the board. And there are front and back. You can fill this out and leave it with someone who has a name tag, so like myself or Nate or Jeff. You can leave it on the stage up here if you would prefer that. It is a lot of information that we have out here tonight, so you can take this home with you. At the bottom of the sheet, you can drop it off at DPNR's offices on here in St. Thomas or in St. Croix, if you happen to be there, and there's also a spot in St. John. You can also go online, so all of this information is online, and you can type in your feedback. So you can grab one of these cards, has the QR code and the website. You can also do it that way, so take some time. We're keeping that survey open. You can drop the worksheet off through August 6th, so a couple of weeks to give you some time for that. But you can always reach out as well. And also, if you wanted to share these cards with some friends and family who couldn't come here tonight, they can also read the information online and provide their feedback. And with that, I will turn it back over to you. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
So yeah, folks can head back to the boards. I don't know if anybody mentioned restrooms are through the back doors and then down the stairs that you find out there in case anybody needs to use the restroom. Anybody with a name tag will be at the boards and can help you out. In terms of the broader process, so we're at the point right now in this plan where we're identifying policies and we're starting to toy with some strategies. If you have ideas for strategies, include that in your feedback tonight. And we're going to be drafting. So this plan is going to come together over the rest of the year, and looking forward to really pulling something together for a finished product in early 2024. So that's our overall process, and we'll see you at the boards. Thank you.